Well, it has been a while since we last talked, eh?
Yeah, it's crazy that it's already been a month. But yeah, I know a lot of has gone on since then, so I think it'll be interesting to discuss that.
No, but you know what's the craziest thing? It
What's that?
is it is already basically there are only like 4 days left until it is August. Can you believe that?
That's crazy.
Like I mean, I'm still processing like, oh my God, it's June, you know? I thought I was caught up then, but July's almost over. So,
Yeah, I mean, I know at least you were in the Bay Area for 2 weeks or so, right?
yeah, so I mean, this is I guess what we're going to be talking about today. We have both been on quite a few journeys, I guess you could say. I was in the Bay Area for 2 weeks. But you, Jack, where were you for these
Well,
past?
I guess for the bulk of the month, essentially starting at the beginning of July, I was in the Northeast until mid July, and I spent a week, this past week in Mammoth doing some running and team bonding with my cross country team. But that's not really as important to this discussion. But it has felt like this month has gone by very quickly.
So wait, so you mean like Mammoth as in like Mammoth Lakes, right?
Yeah, exactly.
In California.
Yeah.
So where? So you said the Northeast, is that right?
Yeah. I think I've said this in past episodes. But I started out in New York, flew into JFK, and then spent a day and a half, a bit under 40 hours in New York. Um, Mostly, well, actually, I really didn't do much except for look at Columbia and went to the Met Museum. My brother spent the day going to Vassar, um, and took the train there, and then we took the train collectively to New Haven, uh, for a day.
So
We
sorry,
spent
wait, hold on. Is that was that Amtrak or is that the whatever commuter line it
Yeah,
is?
it was Amtrak. And I guess it's important to mention that I did ride the LIRR from the airport to the city when I first got there, and then I guess going back to the other itinerary, yeah, we spent a couple hours in New Haven looking at Yale, and then we took the train, also Amtrak, to Providence, which I think is actually pretty underrated. As a train journey, because for a lot of it you follow the water, and I guess we'll talk about this later. But then, yeah, in Providence we spent a couple hours, a bit under 24 hours as well, looking at Brown, walking around, and then we took the Acela to Boston. Spent 4 days in Boston. One of those days was a day trip to Maine, which I got to ride the Downeaster. And then the rest of it was really just it felt like a lot of nomad trips because we spent a couple hours in Syracuse. Then we spent the night in Syracuse, looked at Ithaca as well, drove to Philadelphia, and then eventually took the train through Princeton to New York, and then flew home.
Wow. That wow. That is certainly a very transit filled journey, huh? What do you think? So how many colleges did you visit in total? Because that was the main goal of this trip, right?
Yeah, I think so. For me, it was I think about 10. Um,
10 colleges? Wait, how? You went to? I mean, I
yeah,
presume.
it was Columbia, Yale, Brown, Tufts, Bowdoin, Cornell, Princeton, Penn. That was what, 9?
You know, Jack, I don't think those schools are high caliber enough. Can you like get more elite, please?
Well, yeah, that was intentional because I guess those are all the schools that are elite on my list. A lot of the non-elite schools are on the West Coast, which I haven't got to yet. Um,
Yeah, I got you. So let me ask you this. I mean, because it's so you went from New York. Basically, you went from New York and you followed all the way up to Maine, um, via Boston, and then out to Syracuse in New York and Cornell, and then back down to Philadelphia. You said,
yeah,
and then back up to New York.
exactly.
So how many? So what are the? So let me see if I can list off, and please help me along the way. But like you took, so first of all, you took the Long Island Railroad from Kennedy Airport into the city. And of
Y-
course, you took the New York subway as well, the New York Metro. Then Amtrak up to Yale.
yep.
And then Amtrak again up to Boston.
up to Providence, and then I guess
Ah.
it's interesting to note that the trips to New Haven and Providence were the Northeast Regional, and then the trip to Boston was the Acela, which
Oh, you
was
took the Acela Express.
which yeah, and it was actually really surprising to me because when I was first booking it, so you obviously you have a lot of options when going from Providence to Boston because you can take the MBTA commuter rail, and you can take the Northeast Regional as well, um, but so the commuter rail is about 70 minutes from Providence to Boston, uh, and then the Northeast Regional is about 45 minutes. Then the Acela is about 30 minutes for that. But obviously, there's a huge price difference. So the commuter rail is about like $10, I want to say, and the Northeast Regional is about the same. It's like $10 as well. I think sometimes it can even be cheaper for like $6. But of course, the Acela is $20 or $25 a person, and I believe it was like $80 for the four of us. I think, which is obviously a lot more expensive than anything else. But and of course, the train being 20 years old, I had really low expectations for it. But I was it was surprisingly really nice. But I guess it's a base business class train, so you get what you pay for.
Wow. So you have been on. Was this your first time taking the Acela?
It wasn't the first time I had been on it, but first in like my most recent memory, because I had been on it in 2011, so a long time ago.
Wow, 10 years ago. Wow. Wow, but you've been on the only high speed rail line, official high speed rail line in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I mean, did you get a chance to take the MBTA commuter rail?
I did. Funnily enough, I forced the people I was with to take it. My brother and mom. We were at the Tea Party Museum, and we had to get back to the hotel, which was I think in like the Back Bay area. Uh, so, well, first we had to go to the downtown crossing subway station to get a new Charlie card, because the ones that we had previously were like essentially invalid because they had been destroyed by the tropical storm that we were walking around in, and they were too soaked.
The
So we had to get
tropical storm. Wait.
yeah. Yeah, I was in Boston at the same time that tropical storm. I think it was what Elsa came through, which was super heavy
Oh.
rain. But yeah, anyway, we had to go from downtown crossing to Back Bay, and of course you can easily just take the orange line for like 10 minutes. But originally, since we started at the Tea Party Museum, Google Maps was telling me, okay, the fastest route just to walk to South Station, take the commuter rail to Back Bay. I was really set on doing that, so it was disappointing to have to go to downtown crossing first, because it would make that route not possible. But we ended up doing it anyway. The train was a bit delayed, which was somewhat stressful because we had to eventually get to Fenway Park for a baseball game. But yeah, so long story short, we did ride the commuter rail, but it was just from South Station to Back Bay.
So basically, and for all the people who aren't familiar with the geography of Boston, so Boston has two stations, North and South. The Boston South Station, and then the Tea Party Museum is that right by the station?
Yeah, it's on the water on Boston Harbor. Essentially, it's like a 4 minute walk from South Station.
So from South Station, and then downtown crossing is that also on the commuter rail line, or is that only on the
It's
subway
not.
line?
It's a transfer station between the red and orange line.
So it's not in a commuter stop at all.
No.
Okay, and so what you guys did was basically you took the train from the South Station, which is like in 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 basically central Boston, to basically to Back Bay, which is another big station, which is slightly further from central Boston, but still in like the central area. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, okay. So how long was it? Like, was the journey in total?
It was, I believe, 7 minutes of
Oh
sitting on the
baby,
train.
yeah, dude. As they say, or the shorter the better or whatever. Is there
Yeah.
there's an expression for that or something, right?
Yeah, I don't know it off the top of my head, but yeah, something like that.
Uh-huh. So I mean you definitely got to ride the Boston subway as well, I presume.
Yeah, plenty of times.
Okay.
Primarily, I think we used the green line the most. I still have never been on the orange line or the blue line. Sorry, I didn't ride the orange line either on this trip, but I had been on the orange line when I was there in 2018. Um, we were renting a car out of Logan Airport to get out to upstate New York, so I nearly decided to take the blue line to get out to the airport, but that would have been really inconvenient just because we had to get the car super early in the morning. So it would have forced me to wake up earlier, which I didn't want to do.
So I mean, actually, well, hold on. So getting the car. The MBTA trips, the Massachusetts Bay Transit Authority trips, that was before going to Maine, right? So basically, you did those journeys, and then you took the Downeaster, the Amtrak train, up to Maine, and then back to Boston, and then you got a car.
Yeah. So we got to Boston on I think it was on Tuesday night, and we spent the entire Wednesday going to Maine and back. So we did I was we went to Maine before I did any riding on any of the MBTA trains. Um,
Ah, you went there first.
well, actually, we did take the green line to get to North Station, but that was it.
That was minor. Okay. So basically, you got to Boston, and then like almost immediately, just got on the Amtrak Downeaster all the way up to Maine.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And then so the Downeaster itself. So you said you took it all the way to the terminus, right? To Brunswick.
Yeah, that's on the way back. It was from Brunswick to Boston, but on the way there, unfortunately, at the time for that Fourth of July week and weekend, they were doing track work between I believe Boston and Exeter. So they all the train. Well, they were only running two or three trains that day that even ran, and most of them were just starting and ending in Exeter. So our train in the morning started at Exeter, New Hampshire.
So for reference, like Exeter it's along the coast too. It's in New Hampshire. Um, so I guess about halfway between Boston and Portland, eh? Portland, Maine.
Yeah, it was an hour bus ride, and then it was about another 2 hours on the train to get to Brunswick.
Okay, okay. And then in Brunswick, was that also for college scene?
Yeah, it was only his to look at Bowdoin, but Bowdoin was also the only school that we had a actual guided tour at, which was a hard scheduled time. So
Mm-hmm.
it was a bit more structured.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, and then you got back to Boston, got on the Downeaster again, then back to Boston, and then drove all the way to Syracuse, and then to Cornell.
Yeah, well, we spent we spent Thursday and Friday in Boston, and then we left on Saturday to go out to Cornell.
Okay, Cornell, and then just following back, and then you drove all the way down to Philadelphia, and then you did like SEPTA. What is it? SEPTA, Southeast Pennsylvania Transit Authority. Um, and so then did you drop the car, and then you just went up back. You
Yeah,
took
we
Amtrak
dropped off the
again.
car at 30th Street, and then the next day we went out to Princeton for a couple
Mm-hmm.
hours, and then eventually ended up back in New York.
So you took the train to Princeton, yeah?
Yes,
Did you take the dinky?
yeah, we did. And we also took Amtrak there, which is weird because the friend that we were hanging out with there, my mom's old coworker, had expected us to take New Jersey Transit there because Amtrak only runs there three times a day. Um, but for convenience, at least, you can't actually take any direct train, New Jersey Transit train from Philadelphia to Princeton Junction. You have to take the SEPTA first to Trenton and then transfer. So it's actually like much easier to take Amtrak direct, but they only
Mm.
have one or two trains in the morning that actually make that trip.
Okay, but and then I guess again for reference, because these are all just names. The dinky is, like Princeton University itself is not situated on, the railway lines between Philadelphia and New York. That's Princeton Junction. So there's this little dinky train which connects Princeton Junction and Princeton University. How long is it actually?
It's about 5 minutes,
5 minutes. Uh huh.
and
Okay.
it's quick because the train goes up to like 60 miles an hour, which I guess isn't too surprising, but it is a pretty old train.
And it goes like right like into Princeton, like the campus itself, right?
Yeah. Unfortunately, they built a new station in 2014, which replaced like a historic building from the 1890s, which looked really cool. Um, but the new station's nice as well. It's a
Oh, so
bit different part of the campus, but it's still on campus.
oh, it's still on campus. Okay, that's good. That's good. And then from Princeton Junction, so you took the Dinky back to Princeton Junction, and then just Amtrak again to New York.
Yeah. We didn't actually take the dinky back because the my mom's friend just drove us to Princeton Junction,
Oh, okay.
but we did take it
But
there.
but then it was not New Jersey Transit. You just took the Amtrak back to what is it? Penn
Yeah,
Station.
to Penn Station.
Uh huh. Okay. Wow. I stopped counting like when we were in like Maine or whatever because that's already so many transit like lines networks. But yeah, I mean, well, I guess the big question is at least. Well, let me ask you this first, right? Of like transit aside, even though this is transit talk after all, but like on your trip here, other than transit, it could be a college, it could be a city, it could be whatever. What do you think was the best or your favorite part of your trip?
I think I don't know, but I really really enjoyed being in upstate New York. I don't know why, but like it was at least the section when we got off Interstate 88 and drove towards Ithaca, and then also driving from Ithaca to Syracuse was just really nice. Um, I don't
You
know why,
you
but like being in that rural part of the country was at least different from the rural parts of the country that we have in the West. So like that was it was really nice because it was like farmland, and I could listen to good music too, which helped. But Ithaca itself was like a really cool town because the campus is huge. There's like a lot of nature. The college town is nice, and they have a massive amount of buses. Like they have buses running probably every 10 minutes on some lines.
Well, I think that's definitely another difference because of course, I certainly living in Ohio, right? I am certainly not keen on the eastern United States rural areas. I think they are. I am sick of them. I was sick of them after a minute, but and another thing, like for the listeners, I've been talking with Jack prior, and well, Jack, you visited Ithaca, Cornell University. I heavily dislike Cornell just because like purely because of its location. Um, like being away, like it's not even on the interstate highway system. You have to drive like 20 minutes to get on interstate. What is it? 88, I think.
Yeah, it's about I think 50 minutes from I
Oh
88,
my.
and it's about 30 from I 81.
Oh, 81. That's right, 81. And then like it takes another like 4 hours to get to like New York City. But I guess you really liked Ithaca, huh?
Yeah, I did. And it was cool also because I have family that lives near Syracuse, so I guess experiencing what they live their life is like in a relatively rural part of the country was also just was fascinating too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and in terms of well, okay. So aside from, so we covered basically the rural side. I see that you quite enjoy upstate New York, which I must say is not a sentiment that is shared by a lot of people in this side of the country. But in terms of the actual transit systems, obviously we'll talk in depth uh, in many of the systems, the specificities in the future. But I guess maybe to start off, right? Like what do you think was your favorite system, and what do you think was your worst? Your favorite experience, worst experience.
Yeah. So I guess I would have a 3 or 4. I mean, of course, Amtrak is good, for the most part. I do still often get annoyed with the Amfleet cars because their windows are so small and low, so you can't actually get that good of a view out of them sometimes. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I like I mentioned earlier, I was really impressed by the Acela, and I also was using a speed tracker app, and it got up to 121 miles an hour, which is cool. Of course, that's slow compared to some Japanese trains.
Yeah, yeah. Of course, it's close. It's very slow compared to like everywhere else. But for the United States, it's the apex of high speed rail.
Yeah, but I guess in terms of actual transit systems themselves, Boston does a really good job of maintaining their subways because, of course, in March, I believe they pulled all of the new CRRC, I think it is, train sets because of a derailment and a lot of other mechanical problems. So right now they're still operating all of their legacy fleet, but at least both this year when I was there in 2018, I was really impressed at their maintenance of these train cars because a lot of these were from the 80s of the 90s and they still run really smoothly and they're clean, they're airy, and they look really nice inside for being old. So I think they do a really good job of making the subway experience smooth. So I give them props for that, and the light rails too. The green line is good for the most part in connecting a lot of places, and it was actually really convenient for me because I tried to get out of the city to do some running, and it
Mm-hmm.
was really convenient to get to different parks and to different hills. So I give them a lot of props for that. Of course, I'm really disappointed that they don't actually have like a decent airport connection because I know that if they had like a direct subway to the rental car center, that would be really convincing for my family to just take it to get a rental car. But you have to, I believe you do have to take a shuttle to get
Well,
anywhere from the station.
well, yeah, basically. So I was, and I won't, we won't be spending too much time on Boston itself because we'll be talking about it, I believe, next time as well. But I mean, Boston Logan Airport, there's basically two connections. One is the Silver Line, that goes. It's a bus system. It's not a rail system, but it goes right from the terminal into like central Boston. And then the other option is to take a shuttle bus, to from the airport, which passes by a whole bunch of other stops, including like a rental car center. Take the shuttle to the airport station on the Blue Line, which is basically going. It's the line that goes from Central Boston to the Northeast. So I guess there's that. That's what my family did when we went to Boston almost last year. Yeah, last September. So I guess yeah, it's not that. It certainly isn't as convenient as it could be.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, and I guess back to your question, I think for worse systems, I mean, I guess I enjoyed the experience of Philadelphia more than New York because for me, just like the subway is great and all, but like it felt really empty to me, and it felt like it wasn't really the rat rush that I was expecting that I kind of wanted. Except for the only time it was ever crowded was when I was coming back from the Yankees game that I went to, and that was actually kind of awesome because it was one of the first times I'd seen that many people since COVID, um, and it was just like super packed, and it was good for transit ridership. But I guess Philadelphia itself is a much poorly run system. Is a way it's not run as well. And I happened to be there on a really bad day when they had just started their what they called the tunnel blitz, where they were going to do all this construction on all of the western tunnels and I think the downtown tunnels as well. So they weren't running any trolleys in downtown. Nearly every single station in West Philadelphia was closed, but you wouldn't know it unless you actually walked to the station and saw that there was a blue light flashing. So when we tried to go from UPenn back into downtown, it ended up being a huge fiasco that took way more time than it should have.
I guess you didn't like SEPTA, huh?
Yeah, I didn't. I think I could have liked it. It's a weird system because they have a ton of services, but they're all like pretty slow, and their fare system I remember being confusing because like you have to pay for a certain amount of transfers. It's a lot harder to just get a card and pay for everything. I think.
Well, I will say this regarding Philadelphia, because disclaimer, I've never been on SEPTA itself, but like in terms of, I will say that like in addition to all the things that you mentioned, they're also not so great at advertising because, or at least promotion thereof and their services, because when I was in Philadelphia, I knew there was a subway system, but I like had it certainly. Let me just say this: it doesn't get like the it doesn't have the notoriety that other systems have. Like for example, the New York subway, like oh yeah, it is a core component of New York, right? It doesn't have that with Philadelphia, and also because like oftentimes what I found, and I'm not sure if it's changed or if you had different experiences, but the signage to the systems, like show indicating, oh hey guys, here is a subway stop, is also not good. Like I remember distinctly that like I knew there was a subway system. Oh yeah, it's SEPTA. We weren't planning on doing anything with it because at that time it was like a multiple family trip and we had to all go together in one unit. But I just remember, oh, we were standing by like on the sidewalk by the street, and then there was this just one like pair like stairs that went down somewhere, and like the parents were discussing, and I just walked down there, and I was like, holy crap, this is a SEPTA station. But there was no signage indicating, like outside the station, there was no signage, no signs indicating, hey guys, here's an entrance to the station. Um, I don't
Yeah.
know. Have you had?
Yeah, and I think that that's true for the subway, and I think the trams are even worse because you have to look specifically for a sign that has the number of the tram you're looking for. So it's really hard to just like you're right. There was really no advertising at all, um, and the subway system itself like isn't great. Like the trains are just like stainless steel run of the mill train cars. The stations, a lot of them are pretty dirty, and I hear a lot of them have rats. Um, and it's just like super hot underground, and the trains ran every 10 minutes, which is pretty terrible for a big city. Especially, and it was at like 6 p.m. in rush hour. So I mean, I guess it was a weekend, but like, what are they doing?
Hmm. Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah, I mean, we'll definitely talk more in depth about these systems in the future. But I guess I'm curious about your opinion on. Let me ask you to do this, right? Of all the systems that you've been on, right, including bus systems or whatever. Um, so I guess what does that include? That includes the New York commuter rail, Long Island Railroad, New York subway, various Amtrak lines, MBTA, the various bus systems at Ithaca or Syracuse that you said, and then SEPTA. Do you think you could rank them from best to worst? Like, basically, what are your opinions on like New York and like, um, the Amtrak or New Jersey Transit or whatever?
Yeah, I think my favorite of everything was probably the Acela, because it was fast. It was really comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I guess I really appreciated the big windows because it was such a contrast to the Northeast
Oh
Regional.
yeah,
Um,
it's like basically like going on a 787, have like for the first time having only gone on like older planes before that. Like oh my
yeah,
god, the windows are so big, huh?
yeah, I really like Boston's in general. Probably the T subway is my favorite. Then the MBTA. I guess my part of the problem with the MBTA was that I went to Back Bay, which is notoriously known for having some of the worst air quality in the station because it's covered. So of course all the diesel fumes get caught there, and so that's pretty bad. And then the Green Line would probably be third. I didn't actually end up riding buses in Boston this time. I've been on the system before, just not recently. Um,
The
I
buses in
also
Boston aren't anything special. Don't worry.
Yeah, I mean they have actually really good coverage. Like you can take it almost anywhere. So they're certainly good in that regard. But we never really had a reason to ride it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I did forget to mention though that we did ride the New Haven bus system to get from the train station, New Haven Union Station, to just downtown closer to Yale, and that was actually like a decent system. It got ridership and it actually ran pretty frequently for being on a Monday at like 12 p.m. and it was a holiday schedule as well because it was July 5th.
Mm.
So I was actually pleasantly surprised by that. I would rank that pretty highly. And I guess besides that, then I'd put probably the New York subway, uh, Long Island Railroad, and then SEPTA would be last.
Okay. And what about like the aforementioned like buses in Ithaca or Syracuse that you said?
I didn't actually ride those. I just saw them running.
Oh, okay.
I would give them points for being frequent because they certainly were running a lot.
Give them
Syracuse
points for
actually,
being. Yeah.
Syracuse was disappointing because I was looking to get out to I think it was Onondaga Lake, in the morning to run there, but the bus only came like every 2 hours, so
Oh my
it was
god.
terrible.
Hey, that sounds like home. Yeah, basically, give them points for being existent in rural America.
Yeah, and then that
That
too was also I guess it was a Sunday, but it's still pretty bad.
yeah makes sense. I mean, it is. Wait, was this Ithaca or Syracuse?
Yeah, Syracuse.
Syracuse. Okay. Yeah. Actually, one other thing that I did forget that we did kind of forget to talk about. So you flew from San Francisco to New York JFK like just nonstop, right? Both ways.
Yes.
Tell us about that. What airline? How was it? All that stuff.
It was Delta, which I may or may not have stated
Oh no, the Delta,
in
Delta.
past
That's
videos is my favorite, or past episodes, and anything you hear me say about airlines, videos, whatever. They're definitely my favorite airline of
well. No,
the three legacy carriers.
I'm saying like right now Delta isn't exactly the best thing.
Oh yeah, you mean with the COVID variant?
Yeah, that was a COVID joke.
Yeah. Um, yeah, certainly
Anyways,
not the right word they want to be associated with. But anyway, I think when it comes to airline service, they do a good job. By far, it's interesting because the route San Francisco to New York, New York to L.A., and I think San Francisco to Boston too. All of the airlines throw all of their premium aircraft onto it,
hmm
so it's nice to be on 757s and 767s because they're bigger. And I rarely ever fly on wide body aircraft, so it's interesting to have two aisles on the 767. And that was actually an upgrade because they previously were going to use the 757, but they changed it.
yeah, I remember tracking you. Both on the way. When I tracked you on the way there, you were over Canadian airspace, like the little stretch, of southern Ontario, like to the east of Detroit. And then on the way back, how was the way back, by the way? On the way back, I tracked you like in Nebraska or something.
Yeah, I mean, it was nothing special. I mean, the plane, the Wi-Fi didn't work very well for the first half of that flight, so I wasn't able to. I never ended up getting messaging, so I wasn't able to look at anything. Uh, and I was also disappointed that they don't offer their satellite TV on the 767. So I mean, I guess it was nice because it forced me to watch Nomadland, which I was excited to watch. But
hmm
I was enjoying watching live tennis on the flight to New York.
Oh, who? Who?
It was Wimbledon. It was Federer and Norrie
And who?
and Cameron Norrie. He's from the UK, so he was
Is
popular at Wimbledon.
is he is he new?
Not necessarily new, but he was doing well at the time, and I guess he just won his first tournament too, so I guess that helps.
Oh, is he a youngling?
I think he's like 26, so he's not particularly old, but like
Uh,
he's new to success.
I got you. Okay. Well, I mean, who did he win or?
That match, no, Federer won, which
Uh,
I was very glad about. But
that will be a discussion for a different time. The tennis and all that.
yeah,
Certainly there's a plethora to talk about, but I mean, actually, I guess the last thing that I'm really curious about is we mentioned like all these different not so very elite colleges that you went to. Um, what were your impressions of them? Did you have a favorite or?
well, I think Princeton for me leads in terms of what I would study there because I'm really excited about their School of Public and International Affairs, which is the only program of its kind I've seen. And if I mean I wish it was at a less elitist school, but I mean I'll take it. I mean they have a lot of resources obviously, and they have a lot of good programs. So I'd be excited if I could go there. Of course, it's going to be incredibly difficult, and I still don't know what I'm going to do for my early decision school either because I think Princeton's pretty limiting if I were to apply there for early decision because then I can't use any other early action schools, I think, but I'll have to look into
Right.
that. But yeah, Princeton I'm excited about. I was, like I said earlier, I really enjoyed Ithaca as well, and the Cornell campus because it was huge and it has a lot of nature, and the views are amazing. But Bowdoin really surprised me because I wasn't really sure what to expect. I mean, I knew it'd be cool being in Maine, but the tour guides were exceptional. The school itself is really beautiful, and they have a lot of options. They have a lot of study abroad programs as well, which would be cool.
Mm. What about like Columbia? Manhattan, like pure Manhattan, big city.
Yeah. That's a good question, and I came in on the trip not thinking about it, and I didn't really like the campus either, actually, or at least when I first went to it, it was like maybe it's nice, but I think when I went to other schools later on the trip, I realized pretty quickly that the campus is really separated by the roads, and it doesn't really feel super cohesive compared to a school like Cornell or
Mm,
Bowdoin.
that makes sense. Although, I mean, but it is very convenient, eh? You know, you got the subway, the New York subway right there.
Yeah, it is. But I think I also too found out on the trip that I do really like rural areas and smaller cities more. Um, like I'm not particularly attracted to the urban schools, and I think that was true for Penn as well. Like Penn is a nice campus, but like I think I found the smaller cities to be more enjoyable.
Yeah. I mean, hey, if you actually like prefer smaller cities, come out here, man. Ohio has small cities aplenty.
Yeah, and I think my college counselor recommended, or the school counselor that I was assigned to recommended I go check out Oberlin. Probably not in person, but at least consider them.
Oh
So
yeah.
I might do that.
Yeah, I had a professor recommend me, Oberlin as well, just because um well, I mean, obviously college is a whole another can of worms, right? But because, one big criticism that they often have is that the big schools, the elite schools, you don't actually it's not actually the famous professors teaching. It's just teaching assistants, right?
Yeah, and that's a huge problem
But
at schools like Cornell.
right, exactly. Especially since it's kind of isolated from geographically, right? So the professor will probably be, at other schools or whatever, doing big things, and the teaching aide will be, in Ithaca, blabbering on in classes. And again, I guess just for reference as well. So Jack, you are going to be a senior, this very soon, basically 2021, 2022. And you will be applying for colleges basically, during this fall. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the plan.
Okay. And again, for reference, I am also, well, I will actually also be applying during that because I am on a gap year. I'm taking a gap year during this time. So we will certainly need to talk about colleges more in the future.
Yeah. But anyway, I guess timing wise, I think since we're halfway through this episode, and maybe beyond that, I think I'm interested in pivoting to discussing your trip because obviously you went to a lot of different places. I know more recently you were in Albuquerque, in Oklahoma, I have not stated on air on these episodes, but I have stated to you that I think the Rail Runner is one of my favorite trains that exists in the country. So I do want to talk about that. But you did also spend 2 weeks in San Francisco, which I would be very interested to hear what you think about it, because of course I live there and have been around the area for a lot. But I think you also spent time in Berkeley as well, which I have not been really around as much. So I'm curious what you think of the East Bay primarily, but also just what your experience was like here.
Well, first of all, I think it's important to remember that like time has passed so quickly, but like we actually met at the beginning of the month, eh? Um, like well, twice actually. Like before you went to your Northeast trip, when I was in the Bay Area. The first time, where do we meet? The first time I took the BART and Caltrain down to where you live in the South Bay, and
Yeah,
then the second time we basically did touristy stuff in in Central San Francisco, right?
yeah.
Oh my god, it was only like 20 days ago, but it feels like an eternity. Um, but yeah, actually, it wasn't 2 weeks; it was actually 3 weeks. And so basically, I did not. We are not big on flying per se because first of all, convenience of cars, but second of all, flying is super expensive, especially from Cincinnati. Um, on my way there, this was my I had driven in March and in March, April, and May. I had just gotten back from a big road trip out west. So on my way out to California, I chose to drive from Cincinnati. I took Interstate 70 out, and
Mhm.
then I took Interstate 70 out past Denver, and then basically by Moab, Green River, and then I took Utah Highway 6 up to Salt Lake City, and then from there took Interstate 80 from Salt Lake City to San Francisco. I'd also on my way out west, I'd also like spent a day going with a friend to Rocky Mountain National Park. It was actually funny. Actually, it was pretty funny actually because basically I scheduled that in advance, so I only had one day to get from Cincinnati to Denver. So I established like my longest nonstop drive, my personal record, I guess you could say. Basically 18 hours. I got to Denver at 4 a.m., which was pretty cool. And then I drove next day drove to Salt Lake City, and then the next day the 10 hours from Salt Lake City to the Bay Area. And then yeah, I stayed in. I guess to answer your question, sorry. I stayed with my friend. He has an apartment in Berkeley, so I stayed there in for 3 weeks. Basically doing work either at his place or walking onto Berkeley campus. It's still closed to the public, so obviously you can go inside.
Yeah.
But there are tables outside aplenty, so that was good. And yeah, I must say, the California weather is certainly, nobody is, it may be a definite, it may be a definite stereotype, but it is certainly a very pleasant stereotype. Like the weather was absolutely amazing. Although I will say Berkeley itself, because it's like by the sea and in the mountains, it actually gets kind of cold in the night. I think it was like only 55 in the night, so
Uh,
that wasn't so great. Um, but yeah, I will say like other than obviously the cons, everything is super expensive and all that. Um, I really loved it. It was amazing.
yeah, it's good to hear. I mean, the weather itself is an interesting point because at least uh 55 to me in a sense kind of feels not exactly cold. And it's weird because I spent a lot of time in Southern California where it gets really warm. But even to me, like I've lived in California my entire life, and like sometimes 75 feels super warm. But I guess it's different when you come from Ohio.
Well, here I will say like in contrast. Let me pull up some statistics right now. So today our high was 90, our low was 64. So, and like at least here in the Midwest, right? It's not just the temperature itself, but there's also like the way I described it to my friends of like in the Bay Area in California is that basically imagine the way I described Ohio weather to them is basically imagine California weather, but 10 times hotter, 10 times more humid, and also 10 times more mosquitoes. Because the killer is not the heat, right? Heat is whatever, but it is the humidity, which just makes everything so sticky, and also the mosquitoes, which was like basically like I think like a couple days ago we had like I went to a barbecue in our neighborhood, and just immediately like almost as soon as I got there, I got like 10 mosquito bites. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, the California weather is very pleasant in that regard.
Yeah, yeah, we definitely get a lot less humidity from that standpoint. But yeah, I guess in addition to the weather, just like what else were your takeaways? I guess from Berkeley, because of course it's not all about the weather. And like, did you enjoy like the city life or the like the urban landscape?
Yeah, actually, yeah. So I in Ohio, I live in a very suburban neighborhood. But Berkeley was basically, a 9 minute walk, not even 9 minutes, like probably like 6 minutes, from my friend's apartment to downtown Berkeley, the BART station. So the life was amazing. There's also in Berkeley, like it's actually like super diverse. Not just,
Hmm.
well, I think the most visibly diverse is in terms of like the restaurants. So, so basically me and my friend, we went out for good Indian food, good Mexican food, good all sorts of things. That was really amazing. Although I will say, the one big con, well, I guess it wasn't a con per se, but like one inconvenience, I suppose, is that because, parking in Berkeley is so restrictive and expensive, I had to park my car at another family friend's house in Pleasanton, um, and basically take the BART to and from Pleasanton and Berkeley whenever I needed to go somewhere with the car or use it. So, I guess that was an inconvenience, but, it's more opportunities to take the BART, to take transit. So I guess it wasn't really a con as either. But I also did have many opportunities to take to bountifully take BART, and actually Caltrain as well.
Yeah, and so I think I'll talk ask more about transit in a minute. But I'm curious. So you mentioned that you did take BART a lot and Caltrain a lot. Like were there particular areas of the Bay that you liked more than others? Were there areas that you didn't like as much? Because I would be curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, in terms of the Bay Area itself, I will say that like when I went to San Francisco in it was like May of this year. Like I drove up from the south, coming from Highway 1, and I basically stopped in San Jose in that area. And I honestly at that time I only went to Berkeley once. I took BART up there once, but I didn't even go into downtown, just for time reasons. So I do have experiences in the South Bay, like by San Jose. I think well Berkeley is definitely nice because it's I it's I'll say it's convenient, but it's certainly not the most convenient as it could be. Um, Especially considering that for example, the BART schedules they end super early, which is something I found.
Yeah.
But and also the weather, like I said, it gets honestly really cold at night. So I guess Berkeley was really nice compared to Ohio, in my opinion. But in terms of compared to the rest of the Bay, I will say that I think the peninsula, like downtown San Francisco, it's certainly very touristy, which I think is the um, common impression. Like that day we met at Embarcadero and we went to like Fisherman's Wharf, Lombard Street. It's certainly very touristy. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't take a genius to be able to realize that. South Bay is super rich. Like oh my god, like what is it? What do you guys call that? Southwest Bay, like basically the area in which Caltrain runs.
Uh, well, there's not really a name for it. I mean, I guess. Um, so the richest parts of the area, there's like Los Altos Hills, there's Woodside, there's Atherton, there's Hillsboro, and those are
Yeah,
all on like the,
exactly.
the 280 corridor in particular has like super
280.
big lots, and then the Caltrain corridor itself also is wealthy, but those are much smaller lots and really poor home value. Like you pay a lot of money for the homes just to say you live in like Palo Alto, but then you only get like a 8,000 square foot lot.
Mm. Yeah. Well, I mean, I obviously didn't do anything there, but I did pass by quite a few times. So basically, Mountain View, Los Altos, um, yeah, all that stuff. Millbrae also as well. It's so rich. Like, oh my god. But of course it's nice, absolutely. Rich neighborhoods are nice. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think in terms of living in the Bay Area, I think Berkeley is very convenient because you can take the BART or a bus into downtown San Francisco, and since I wasn't doing much in the very super uber rich areas, I think it was also very nice by its intrinsically too.
Hmm. And so you took BART, you took Caltrain. Were there any other transit modes or transit agencies that you used?
I took I took the Ace Transit bus system, because my friend he was a Berkeley grad. He actually because Berkeley students they have the bus pass for Ace Transit. So basically when I took the bus into downtown San Francisco, I would just use that, so I wouldn't have to so I wouldn't have to pay like what $9 to the system. Um, what else did I do?
Did you ride Amtrak at all?
I did not, unfortunately. I was thinking of doing that. I was also thinking of taking what was that one? The Ace train, the one that you had gone on like
Yeah,
a
in
month
June.
ago. I was thinking of doing that, like going out to Stockton, but my time in the Bay Area it was pretty precious, so I had other stuff that need to be done. Um, but I did take BART like a lot. Like I mentioned, I parked my car in Pleasanton, so I had to like like for example, when I went to Costco to buy groceries or whatever, or to go on a day trip somewhere else, right? It always involved a 2 hour one way BART ride. So I certainly spent a lot of time on BART, let's just say.
Mhm. And what do you think about BART? Like, did you think it was comfortable? Did you think it was clean? Because I know, of course, a lot of people in the Bay Area have this perception that it's like this really dangerous system, and of course, I've also used it more often recently and found a lot of those are untrue. Um, and I know another interesting conversation we were having is like, what's is the newer train cars, the fleet of the future, better than the old ones? Why or why not? So, um,
Yeah,
what were
so
your
I mean,
perceptions of BART?
we definitely talked about this. Like we talked about it, in calls and texts and all that. But I think well, it's certainly a very nice system. Let's just say, like the system itself is very nice. Um, Before like actually having a close look, um, like when I first learned about the existence of BART, basically, um, like I looked at the map and I was like, "What is this? Like, oh my god, why are all four lines together?" Right? Because that's actually a kind of a pet peeve of mine. Like, why do you have two lines running like simultaneously, like together for like long stretches?
Mhm.
Um, it's kind of a peeve of mine. But the more like when I looked at it closely, I was like, "Huh, this makes so much sense." Because you have, for example, the blue line coming in from Dublin Pleasanton going into the city. You have the red line going from Richmond in the East Bay and then also going into the city. You have the yellow line going from Antioch, which is also from another like completely different area in the East Bay going into the city. And then like the part where they all run together is basically like the most important corridor of the city. So it's, I think, like we said before, it really makes sense as a system to bring suburbites into the city. And then also the orange line is the orange line, right?
Yeah.
Which just runs the entire. Oh, I forgot the green line, which also runs from like, what is it, Milpitas or something?
Yeah, yeah, it's now from Berryessa.
Berryessa, also in like the southeast bay into the city. But the orange line, just like if you look at a map, right, it just runs along the entirety of the East Bay, so you can get from the Northeast Bay to the Southeast Bay without having to transfer. So I think like that was like the design. The more I looked at it, I was like, oh, this makes actually pretty good sense. Um, of course, the common criticisms that I have, and I'm sure, which I think I've expressed before, which are very common. The trains there are so infrequent, especially when compared to like New York or whatever. The cost is so ridiculous. Like the cost of one fare would honestly, like if you were to ride the BART from like one extremity to the other, that would be the same cost as like a week pass in New York, right?
Yeah.
Um, and then yeah, the infrequencies, the cost. It also, like I mentioned before, it also ends service so early.
Yeah,
Like,
and I guess in that regard, that's kind of a COVID thing because it did used to have later trains, and I think they're
mm,
going to be returning some of them with their changes on August 2nd, but that used to not be a problem.
because I remember, like for example, when we met up um, in Burlingame, which is in the South Bay. I that was a legitimate concern. Like, oh my God, are there going to be like BART trains back so I can get back to Berkeley? But on that day, I was fortunate enough to catch a Caltrain all the way back, so that was nice. But yeah, BART. Honestly, if I don't think about how much money I spent on it, BART was really nice.
Yeah, and what was your opinion on the new train cars? Like, did you think they were better? Because I know you mentioned had far less seating, which is true. They certainly they emphasize more the standing aspect of the trains, which I guess can be good in rush hour. But of course, BART being a suburban system, as we talked about, it would make sense to have more seating, I would think.
Well, here, actually, let me ask you. Well, because we've talked about this, but like, can you just say again, for everyone, like, what do you think about it? Like, basically, the rundown is the old trains are basically how effectively buses are organized, right? There's just seats of two by the windows, like two, 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 and then sometimes on one side there will be like just seats of one, 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 either facing in one direction or facing in the other direction. While the newer cars, they are certainly more, high tech, and they also have, for example, the sideways seats, and then they also have, what else do they have? They have like poles, and it's not like so row organized, eh? Um, but what do you think about that?
Yeah, so from an aesthetic standpoint, the new cars are obviously much nicer,
Of
and
course.
much cleaner, and I think they're easier to clean generally. Like the older cars have a lot of like places where like dirty drug needles end up, which I think is a lot harder to just like place randomly, and on the newer train cars. But I think the issue is that BART is clearly marketed as a suburban train system that isn't changing anytime soon. So I think it doesn't make a lot of sense for BART to invest heavily in train sets that don't offer a lot of seating space because, like you mentioned, like the extremities, it takes an hour and 40 minutes to go from SFO Airport to Antioch, and it takes like over an hour and 20 minutes to go from Berryessa to Richmond, or like an hour and 10 minutes to go from Dublin Pleasanton to Daly City. So you can sit on the trains for a while.
I mean, yeah, and again, without getting too much into it, because we will obviously have episodes for this purely. But I guess it's honestly just another peeve of mine. There's less seating, which I think is ain't so great. But also because, like, for example, the sideways seats, it's just I never like them because I feel like, oh no, now we're going left and right, and I can't see the action of what's going on no matter what, right? I can't see the things going away from me. I can't see the things coming, like, I can't see the outside coming to me. Can't see them coming away from me. So, I don't know. I just really don't like that setup. Um, yeah, it feels like a bus. It feels like a fancy bus, not a proper train, per se, you know?
Yeah, yeah, I get
But,
that.
hmm but then basically after that, 3 weeks, and then I just drove, well, and then I drove 3 weeks in the Bay Area, and after that I drove the other transcontinental route all the way back to Ohio.
And on that section, so you mentioned you took the rail runner. Do you have any other transit related experiences besides that?
Well, actually no, because well on the way coming here or there, I'm sorry, on the way going to California, I was in close proximity of both the Denver and the Utah and the Salt Lake City light rail systems, but I could not take either of them because of time. And then coming back, basically the first day I drove from, I chose a different route. I didn't take like the straight like 7080 highway. I took basically the equivalent of highway Interstate 40. So that's the one that goes through Flagstaff, Arizona, Albuquerque, Amarillo, Texas, Oklahoma City, and that one. So on the first day, I drove from San Francisco uh,
It was Kingman, right?
to Kingman, Arizona. Oh my God, you know better than me. That day was actually really delayed because like my friend's mother brought us out for like to dim sum at this super fancy like on the bay restaurant, on the water restaurant. So I only left at like 3 p.m. and then I only got there at like 2 a.m. But first day Kingman, Arizona. Second day Kingman, Arizona to Albuquerque, New Mexico. On that route, I stopped at Petrified Forest National Park. The third day, I stayed in Albuquerque. The third day was basically I stayed in Albuquerque and I took the Rail Runner, which is the commuter rail that goes from Albuquerque to Santa Fe. I got up really early in the morning for that, and then got back at in the afternoon. The fourth day, I drove from Albuquerque to Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. That one was kind of weird too because in the morning I went to Petroglyph National Monument, which is right by Albuquerque,
Hmm.
in the morning. So I could only leave at like again at like 4 p.m. and I got to Oklahoma City at like 3 a.m. Um, the fifth day I drove from Oklahoma City to Tahlequah, which is the capital of the Cherokee Nation, and saw visited the Cherokee Nation's museums there. And that night I drove to Tulsa, and then on the sixth day, I drove the 12 hours or 11. Yeah, 11 hours plus 1 hour time difference from Tulsa to Cincinnati. But for your question again, the Rail Runner, it was, I really loved it because, like I think like you said, I think the reason that you mentioned why you liked it the most is because of its livery, the paint system, right? The look of the trains is obviously really cool. Um, but I think for me, like, it was the one way train, the one way ride, sorry, the one way ride from Albuquerque to Santa Fe and vice versa takes an hour and a half. And for the majority of it, like, it is not even like, it's not, in the city. It's not even like in the suburbs as off other commuter systems are, right? Like, it's not going through farmlands and, oh, here's a neighborhood, here's another neighborhood. It's going through the desert, like the New Mexico desert. Like,
Hmm.
large tracts of, the surrounding area is just pure undeveloped desert, which is just so serene. Like, I remember, I was, studying some vocabulary. I was doing some language study, and I was just, occasionally glancing out the window, and I'm like, wow, this is really amazing. Because I guess it sort of gave me like a sort of feeling of, a sense of being on like one of Amtrak's long distance journeys without having to pay like 200 bucks.
Yeah,
By the way, the fare was only like $7 for a student. So
for the entire trip to Santa Fe.
for for a round trip actually.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so basically 3 hours of train in the New Mexico desert for $7, which was amazing. Santa Fe is a tourist destination, whatever. Um, you know, I went to the New Mexican History Museum, which is cool in Santa Fe, and obviously the other tourist attractions. But yeah, no, the Rail Runner, 10 out of 10, like, absolutely. You're absolutely right in thinking that it is really cool.
Yeah, I certainly would hope to ride it sometime. I mean, I don't have any plans anytime soon to go to Mexico, but I mean,
If you're ever in a if you're ever in a need to drive from the Bay Area to Cincinnati, Ohio, and you decide, hey, I'm gonna take Interstate 40, boom.
yeah, certainly I would hope to experience it like you did. Yeah, because I mean, it's rare that you find a train that goes through essentially the middle of nowhere, and I guess it's rare too. Like an hour and a half is long for a commuter train, so I'm surprised
It's
that people would make that trip on the regular.
well, it's actually, it was actually really surprising because the amount of people, because Albuquerque and Santa Fe, they are not, insignificant places, right? Like, as a whole, New Mexico may be not so significant, but like within New Mexico, right? Albuquerque and Santa Fe are pretty significant places. Um, so like I remember going from Albuquerque to Santa Fe in the morning. Like, it wasn't so packed. It wasn't there, like, there weren't a lot of people. Partially because it was at like 8 a.m. Um, so I had to wake up at like 7 and then drive to the station. But I remember on the way back, like the afternoon train at like 3 p.m. on the it was a Sunday, by the way. The afternoon train at like 2 to what was it, like 2:30 to 4. That was absolutely like full. And I mean, like how like the commuter rails, they often have like, sometimes they will have like tables with like groups of
Yeah,
seating, like seating groups of four. Like, they were like all taken. Like, not every single seat, but like every single one of those groups. So it definitely surprised me because it was way more popular than I had expected. But it's certainly, it's certainly a an interesting experience, and also definitely one, like, if you're in Albuquerque, right? The other option is to drive, an hour on Interstate 25 up to Santa Fe, which I had considered, but then I was like, no, why not take the train that only costs $7, and is also, really cool going through the middle of the desert,
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think the train would win pretty easily. Um, the other thing I find curious about the rail run is that it's only two or three train cars, right? It's not very long, is it?
I think the one I was on was like 4 or 5. It's certainly not like, you know the commuter, the trains of like the Long Island Railroad or whatever. But no, it is. it's not like it wasn't like two cars either, like the Dinky, for example. um, but yeah, again, like I said, 10 out of 10, 1,000%.
Yeah, yeah, that's good to hear, especially because so many commuter rails don't really either have good scenery or they don't have high frequency or they're too expensive. So I think it's interesting to see that there is a system that is so traditional in so many ways, but it's also succeeding at what it's meant to do. Um, but anyway, I think we're coming up on time in this episode. So if you have any
Mm-hmm.
last thoughts on your road trip, I'd be all ears to hear them. Um,
Let me say one last thing. I'll say one last thing, which is what was I gonna say? If like actually, if you do get a chance, right, take the Interstate 40 run because there's so many, like, because the normal transcontinental routes, right? They obviously go through pretty places and all, but like Interstate 40 like doesn't get too much love, um, because for example, Petrified Forest National Park is right there, and like hardly no one goes there, um, or for example, the Indian nations of Oklahoma. Those are amazing too, but hardly anybody goes there. Um, so I everybody heads off to the Grand Canyon, which Interstate 40 will lead to, but it's not right there, or Sedona, which is also really close, or all the other you know different sites along the way. Like for example, the western end of Interstate 40 is Interstate 15 between Los Angeles and Las Vegas. So most of the people they don't take Interstate 40 from Los Angeles; they just go straight up to 15 to Las Vegas.
mhm.
So that's so it's certainly less traveled the the main of the transcontinental interstates, but it is absolutely worth you know the time and the effort to go along the way.
Yeah, yeah, certainly. Um, want to start driving more often and maybe doing road trips later on. I think that's definitely a place I need to go to.
Yeah, we can go together, man. Once you get your license.
Yeah, well, I do have a license. I just wish I mean, not necessarily wish, but I mean, I should use it more. I guess is what I should say.
Mhm. Mhm.
But yeah, anyway, I think timing wise, we've covered a lot of content in this episode. So to all the people listening, hopefully this gave you a glimpse into, especially Bay Area transit, but also what some commuter rail systems are like outside of major city centers. I think it's interesting to compare the commuter rails on the East Coast from Long Island Railroad to MBTA, but also to see like what smaller systems like the railroad are doing in New Mexico. So hopefully
Yeah.
this covered a lot of variety of topics.
And also just our our recent trip experiences after our 1 month hiatus, especially.
Yeah, and I guess on that regard, for viewers, like this is certainly now starting to become more regular, and we will be recording twice a week now. So expect more regular episodes. But otherwise, for everyone watching, thanks for listening, and we will see you in the next episode.